Thanks for joining us back on the show as we engage Professor Zoaka all the way from University of Abuja. Prof, a very good day to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon.
All right, sir. So, Prof, without wasting time, the first thing anybody wants to know is that we have talked about housing deficit in Nigeria. But from your own understanding as a policy development expert, particularly development policy, what has been your assessment of the Nigerian housing sector?
The assessment of Nigerian housing policy?
Sector, yes, sir.
Well, for me, I think the housing policy that we have in Nigeria has some, if you like, challenges that I think should have been, clearly outlined in the policy document itself. You see, although a lot of people will always conclude that the problem with Nigeria is not the policies are all, very good, but that the implementation is usually a challenge. But I think right from the design, policy design, I think once you don't have a proper design of a policy, then you will have problems in terms of implementation. And I think so. Therefore, I think right from the design of the policy, I think that is where the problem lies. For instance, I will just give a few examples. If you take, the major stakeholders, for instance, when you are going to design a policy, did they have any stakeholders meeting with those that are concerned? That is, various stakeholders, including, for instance, those that supply building materials, those that are in need of the housing, maybe in the public sector, in the private sector, and the homeless, those that don't have anywhere to stay. Did they have any such, and even developers, those that may be willing to invest, in such a sector? Did they have any such a meeting before, designing the policy? And if they had such a meeting, did they go around the country? Because maybe the housing, problem may not be the same all over the country. There could be places where the housing, problem is a little bit more, felt than others. So for me, I think the problem will go back to the policy design, even though they have a policy. But I think the problem is the design of the policy. And once you have, issues with the design, then of course you have policies, you have problem with the implementation. I think that is fundamentally for me very key, because right at the level of the agenda setting, how did the problem get on the agenda? And then when it got on the agenda, how did they go about formulating the policy? Because in policy formulation, of course, you are expected to have some input, and the input should have been from virtually all the stakeholders. So once you neglect any stakeholder, including the banks that will be financing some of these houses, if you don't engage them, then of course you'll be having issues. And I think for me that is my major take on that.
Now, then you talk about the policy challenge that we have even from the housing. In 2017, the federal government developed a policy and enacted a law that established National Housing Fund for workers. And a lot of people were so expectant that this National Housing Fund will provide houses for Nigerian workers. But guess what? Less than 3 years into that initiation, into that policy, it was robbed into corruption. I could recall the Nigerian Labour Congress came out and shouted that all the money in the National Housing Fund has been stolen, because the fund deduct money from federal government staff to put as a pool into this kind of policy. But here we are, the challenge is still there, and nobody is even talking about National Housing Fund anymore because of the myriad of challenges that we have seen. But from your own understanding as a policy developer, what do you think was wrong with National Housing Fund that we have today?
One of the problems I have with the National Housing Fund is that you see, when they are collecting the funds from the workers did not fill any form. All they do is to deduct the money from source. Now, when you are now, trying to apply, for a house, you are now expected to start filling. They now bring also bureaucratic bottlenecks, to just frustrate you. So by the time you go to them, you spend a lot of time, because you have to fill forms, you have to get a private mortgage institution that is willing to now collect the loans, because they won't even give you the money directly. They will have to channel it through, a bank, a national, a mortgage bank. Now, that mortgage bank will now be the ones to maybe get a house for you, or they're expected actually to build for you. But you see, the problem is when they were collecting the money from you, they didn't fill any form. Now, when it comes to you trying to access the same funds, they now create bottlenecks for you to get the funds. And you see, even when you are gets given to this, because claimed that they have been able to build, and some thousands of civil servants have benefited, particularly retirees and all that, from the housing fund. But when you look at it in terms of the number of beneficiaries, they claim, for instance, in 2024, that about 44,333 retirees received refunds, from the National Housing Funds. Then they also claim that about 71.5 billion was approved and disbursed as loans to beneficiaries. And then, of course, we find that in 2024 alone, the National Housing Fund collections hit about 103 billion. But this 103 billion is meant to be dispersed to workers, so that workers can begin to own their houses. But I think the problem of getting a house, through the Federal Mortgage Bank is itself a very big, it's a big challenge because of the bottlenecks, the corruption that goes into the system itself, and the fact that most times the arena factor also plays a big role, because you have to know somebody who is in one of these mortgage banks, and then you can now, through that person, maybe he will help you to be able to access the funds. Even also, it's practically impossible and it's very difficult for workers to really benefit from that. And if you've not forgotten, there was a project for workers that was done on the airport road, and suddenly I think one of the ministers just came and demolished the entire estate, not minding that workers have invested their funds into that. Apart from several housing estates that were allocated to developers that have been seized because they are doing a centenary village. So you see, workers go through a lot in trying to own a house, in Nigeria, and that's simply because there is no any serious commitment on the part of those that are given that responsibility. They don't consider it to be a responsibility. Rather, they consider it to be a way for them to make their own money using whatever means they can, to accumulate. And that's what you find with most of this. And that is why I say it's not really working. It's not really working, because you don't have key performance indicators that has been given to them that they will check. Now, every year, if you're able to collect this amount of money, we should expect that this number of workers, civil servants, should have benefited. And what is the spread of even the benefits in terms of workers? Is it all over Nigeria that workers working for the federal government all over Nigeria, or is it just within the federal capital, or where? So when you are not very clear and specific, when you are making a policy, your objectives must be very clear and unambiguous. But when you make ambiguous statements, we are going to build so number of houses, where are you building them? What are the locations? What type of houses? Who are going to be the beneficiaries? How do you source the beneficiaries? So these are fundamental questions that are not being asked. So all you hear is that somebody has been given some billions to go and develop houses. Where are they developing these houses? Who are the beneficiaries?
Prof, one thing I found so very interesting is that most of this policy, we borrowed it, we copied it. In development climate, housing policy work smoothly without any challenge. But here in Nigeria, it's like a bottleneck. It's like a camel trying to pass through a needle eye. But in your own understanding as a policy expert, why is that when we borrow such policy, it never works? But in development climate, it works easily in their own regards. But here, such policy, it will not work and will not even get the benefit as you rightly pointed about. Help us to understand why such policies are not working when we copy from developed climes.
You see, for me, I think the problem is basically the kind of people put in charge of these projects, or to implement those policies. Once people if they don't have the required knowledge in that field, it becomes a problem. So they won't be able to implement it. Now you look at it. If you take the construction industry now, people building houses and all that, this is one of the most difficult things that you want to engage in now, because even the cost of cement has gone up. It's as if there are no regulators, people don't care. There are no building code, enforcement. So people build also substandard houses that eventually will collapse, and kill people. So why are we having this kind of challenges? I think the problem is with the individuals that have been given this responsibility. You see, the thing is that when people don't, and the level of patriotism, because for you to get people that will be committed to the country, I think the patriotism must be seen running down from the top to bottom. So when there is no patriotism at the top, individuals at the top are busy amassing, wealth for themselves and members of their family, then everybody now, interprets that to be like a unwritten code that should be implemented virtually down the line. And so you find a lot of individuals who are given responsibility, they interpret to be as if it is their own opportunity, particularly those ones managing funds. If they're managing funds on behalf of government, they feel it's their opportunity, for them to make their own money. So they are more concerned about what they will get, rather than, ensuring that the civil servants that they're working for are properly accommodated in their house, so that they can also be relieved of the pressure of paying rents and all that, and then work fully towards the realization of government policy. I think that's why I find a lot of policies don't really work, because the workers themselves are not happy. They are not motivated. So what motivates you to go to a place of work? You know that they are getting nothing. At the end of the day, when you are going to build a house, you have to go and buy a land. Then you need to assemble blocks, assemble cement, get all sorts of workers. Most times, quacks that are not experts, in their various fields, whether they're masons, carpenters, or whatever. And then they now erect a structure for you, which may not, and there's nobody to come and inspect that structure when it was under construction to see whether you even meet so largely when I look at it, there's incapacity on the part of the policy implementers. They don't have the capacity, because when they just think, well, anything written on paper can easily be translated into reality. Okay, but if you don't understand what is to be done, how do you now work to get the results? And when you are also not given any target, no targets given to you, and you just go ahead and, because I know that the federal government said if you can build 5,000 houses at one time, I think around 2017 in the 36 states, they are more interested in job creation, that to create jobs for between 10 to about 15 million, people who will be engaged, in that industry, in constructing houses, But that type of job is also going to be temporary, because once they build the houses, unless you have more houses to build, or you engage them in building more houses, then you don't, they now become a problem again, to the society. So I think we don't have some very serious, individuals that are charged with the responsibility of implementing these policies. And we just say, see, if it's policy making, we just believe that you can bring anybody and put him to be in charge. So it's not impossible to go and bring somebody who has read whatever course that is unrelated to that sector, and then you make him the managing director of a housing project. Certainly you are not going to achieve any house at the end of the day, because he doesn't understand what he's supposed to do, so he cannot be able to. But if you bring people that have the knowledge, you could be able to get things done.
Exactly.
And there should be monitoring and evaluation. You don't just give people assignments, no monitoring, no evaluation. And even those charged with the monitoring and evaluation, they convert it to money-making venture. You take National Assembly that is supposed to conduct oversight. What have they converted? They've converted the oversight making to money-making venture. They're not interested in any oversight.
So, Prof,
problem. You have a problem.
Exactly. Let's take a look at this current administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He came with a Renew Hope agenda, and his own target is that to build over 250 housing units in each state. Remember that in 2017-2018, we have similar project target by the Buhari administration to build over 5,000 housing. And for me, my concern, which prompted this discussion, is this. National Housing Fund is like it has been abandoned. But from your own understanding, this Renew Hope Housing Estate is still a federal government agenda. But what do you think can be done better with this Renew Hope Housing Estate that is springing up across the 36 states in Nigeria, so that we will not fall into the same trap of 2017-2018 under National Housing Fund initiative?
You see, if it's virtually the same thing being repeated over and over again. Because with the Renewed Hope Agenda housing projects, I think some funds were released, some billions of naira released to because you see, this is even duplication. You are duplicating the functions of the, federal housing. You have a federal housing authority, and then they have unbundled some smaller organizations.
Exactly.
But I think what is important is that if you have funds that are supposed to be used for house development and all that, they should go to the right, organization. You don't create another organization and create another slogan and then think that you're going to provide houses. That's not how to there should be continuity, in governance. Don't forget that Shagari started the mass housing project, and virtually all the local governments in Nigeria were identified for them to construct Shagari low cost housing units, 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, and in fact, some of the places up to now, you go to some of the housing, Shagari's housing low cost, they are still at the foundation level. Some people collected money for those foundation and disappeared. So there's no continuity. No continuity. Some of the projects were even abandoned because even to produce houses, they look at it as politics. And so some of the locations that were provided for the Shagari low cost houses to be built were outskirts of the town. And some of those places were banned eventually by hoodlums and all that. So you don't start, the problem we're having is this lack of continuity. Lack of continuity. And so when you have this policy somersaults, every regime comes, they change the policy. They want to identify, they want the thing to be unique to them. You don't run government like that. You don't run a government like that. You should be serious about achieving results more than just putting your name in buildings and all those type of things. These are not, or even in policy. You want the policy to be identified with you. So have the 10-point agenda the 7-point agenda under Eradua. Eradua left, then Jonathan came in. Jonathan came with the transformation, transformative something. Then he left, and then of course, Buhari came, and then started his own. And then now you have Tinubu, he has started his own. So there's no continuity. And you see, when you don't have continuity, and then the organizations are not given targets that they must achieve. Because you fund them, then you give them targets. And then, of course, with the rising cost of building material, and then, of course, it means whatever you are expecting that they will use to build a simple 1-bedroom or so will have increased. Because we are also not depending on local materials. We are virtually importing most of our building materials, including doors that can be made comfortably in Nigeria. But thank God now with the globalization, a lot of the companies in Turkey and so on are establishing their branches here in Nigeria to build strong doors, which are also being constructed in Benin and in some parts of Kwara and all that, because they have the wood, and they have the means to do that. But most of us will still believe that we have to import doors in China that will not last. Most of their doors don't last. Most of the things they bring in are of low standard and low quality, and you have Standard Organization of Nigeria there at the ports. They watch when these things are being brought into the country, and then people just waste their hard-earned money on things that will not last. So I think it's a whole chain that we have to be looking at. The policies in themselves, if only there's continuity, we will not be recording some real progress. Just look at what Abacha did with the Gorimpa project. The aim was not to stop where it is, it was to take it to as far as Zuba. So it's going to be one of the largest housing projects in Africa, or if not even in the world. But somehow, because of lack of continuity, it stopped. But I think with the continuation with private, because now you have PPP in place, and a lot of the estates, although land is a problem, double allocation issues in places, not all over the country, particularly in some of the cities. You have problem with land allocation. And every new government, they come in, they want to collect all the land for themselves, destroy other people's houses, and take it for it. So you can't continue, you don't run a society like that. You can create new areas where you can go and now become the lord of those places. But where people are already living, you came and met them, now you want to remove them so that you can take over their land under all sorts of pretexts. So I don't think the problem really will be with some of these issues that are not being properly addressed. The policies themselves have challenges, and I think if they are properly addressed, then we can have some stability within that sector.
Exactly. Now let's not talk about the state government. You did mention about state government also trying to do their own, but we have seen little from that regard, because most of them depend on federal government bringing money into the state to come and talk about housing estate. But we have heard little about state government. But what do you think is discouraging state government to go into housing for their people? Because at the federal level, we know that federal government is doing much in that regard. But for states, what is discouraging them, Prof?
You see, I think some of the states recently have started putting in some interest, in housing construction. And there are quite a number of states that have been building state housing, low-cost houses. So we have some states that have built low-cost houses, and it depends on the government that are in place. If the governor, for instance, feel that people are not properly housed, and there's need to bring them into modernity by ensuring that they're living in places that are decent. So they can create, some new areas and then allocate plots. If they can't build the houses for the people, they can allocate plots, and then what is expected actually from the government is at least make roads available in those places, make electricity available, make water available, and the rest will be done by the occupants of those areas. And then of course, so the state governments, I think it's just this unnecessary dependence on federal government allocations. That is what is causing it. And then when you get the allocation, for instance, what are the targets given to them when they collect the allocations? No targets. So they now feel that the money is their own. So every governor wants to be a trillionaire. So what he does is just to be collecting the money for himself. So we don't see any projects going on, in most of the states. Why? Because there's no any serious target given to anybody. You just collect money. Local governments collect their own money monthly. What is the target? For instance, I have lived in Babalada for a very long time. If not that the minister came in and most of the roads that are not motorable, including a road leading to their market, he now put up a road there. They are not doing anything. So such local governments cannot even think of building, even for themselves, accommodation for themselves as the local government workers. They don't have accommodation for themselves as workers who are working in local government. Not talk about, so you have most of the governors, what they do, they have federal secretariat. The next thing they want to remodel a government house. They're not thinking of the people. So they want to build another government house to befit their own status as the new governor. He's not going to stay in that kind of a ramshackle government house. He wants something that shows that displays power.
Well, we're expecting a better connection with Prof, although he has said it all in the regards of the state government, talking about state government doing the right thing with the money they are receiving. But on the other hand, I think the next question I want to ask him, Prof, when it comes up. Hello, Prof, are you there?
I'm there, even though there was a slight interruption.
All right, continue with your thoughts, sir.
Yeah, you asked this because I think I'm actually true that.
Okay, so let's take on the private sector, the PPP arrangement in the past. There was a particular PPP arrangement I followed the development in Nasarawa State some years back, and at that point in time, the government at that time gave money, brought its own PPP arrangement package for estate to be built, but all of a sudden, the person in question, the PPP partners, they ran away with the money. Then recently, a new government came in place, and the same people and the government said, okay, you are the one that collected money from a former government. Please come and build this estate that you have agreed that you are going to do. Guess what happened, Prof? For about 8 months, the partners the private sector supposed to get involved and build those houses, never build that particular estate, hoping that the state government will release another money for them. Then here we are, the state government went to another site and built another estate and develop it to the fullness and commission it. Then the private sector was now running strata to build the one that was initially supposed to build more than 5 years ago. And the question that comes to mind is, why is it that these PPP arrangements sometimes become a politics and a sharing formula when it comes to building houses for ordinary workers? And today, nobody's are moving to that estate, but the project is still there.
Yeah, I think the PPP problem is that it's supposed to be private-public partnership.
Exactly.
Now, in the public will be the government and of course individuals, and of course the private sector companies that have expertise, for instance, in housing construction. Now they come into, most of them, what they're interested in is getting the land. When they are going to be allocated land, maybe they get it at virtually give away prices, because the government is constrained that they're going to use it to build houses for their citizens. So they make accessibility not to be too difficult for most of them. Now, some of these individuals actually don't have any form of experience, in housing, construction. They just register, some of these emergencies companies that has no office, even if they have an office, maybe just one room somewhere. And then they are claiming they can claim they've done projects elsewhere and all that without any evidence. And then you now engage them. So when you engage them, they don't have the capacity. Clearly, when they don't have the capacity, then that's what you will find in this abandonment. And most times some of these individuals actually run a kind of scam, housing scam. So you find a lot of them distributing flyers, because to print flyers is not too expensive. So they can print flyers and do all sorts of things, get people to enroll into their housing scheme, and they disappear with the money. So there are a lot of scams going on, even the PPP arrangement. So because some of the state governments don't actually take their time to do some due diligence in terms of trying to know whether this construction company has been engaged in constructing houses. Because if you don't get, companies that have been building houses, that have the capacity, they have office, they have staff, they have evidence of their buildings all over the place, and you are engaged quacks, of course you can't get anything from that. And that is usually the problem. The scam, if the governor wants to scam his own people, that's what he will do. He is not just satisfied with collecting money from federal government. He wants the one that his own people come also invest, that he will collect from them. So there are also scams going on, even within the housing sector. I think a lot of care has to be taken.
Exactly. Prof, as we round up in the next few minutes, your suggestion to the federal government of Nigeria: Renew Hope Estate is ongoing, but you said something very, very fundamental: continuity, continuity, continuity. Your advice to the federal government, so that if the Tinubu government leaves tomorrow, there won't be an abandonment of such a very laudable project like the Renew Hope agenda of housing estate that we have right now. What's your advice to them?
I think the first thing for them to do really is to let them be providing some detailed information in terms of how many houses they've been able to construct, either in 6 months' time or in 1 year time. At least we should be able to know total number, and then how many families have been accommodated, in those houses, because they can construct the houses and make it difficult for people to even, get, some of the houses. That's another problem. So you have a lot of houses, federal government houses all over the place, but accessibility is another big challenge. So when they construct, they should allow, people that are working to be able to have houses where they can live. Not those ones that don't have, because some of them, again, one person can acquire like 10 flats or 20 for himself. They distribute it again back to themselves. Then the cost of buying from them is astronomical. Nobody's able to buy. So you see the buildings are empty. Nobody is there because they are trying to, commercialize it and make profit out of it, even though the government's intention is to ensure that, civil servants are accommodated. So I think there should be transparency, in the in building and allocation of these houses, and continuity. There's no need to begin to start new programs, new renewed hope, because after renewed hope, another government will come, and they may not be renewed hope. They may have their own slogan, and they'll throw out away this thing. In fact, we've seen in Kano where even the rooftops of houses built by classroom schools and all are built by Kwankwaso were repainted into Ganduje's own idea. So you don't continue to run government like that.